Today we'll continue from that point onwards, and we'll also look into instead of positional argument, keyword arguments, and arbitrary number of arguments. There are certain additional things that we're going to look at now. So let's take an example to understand why these keyword and positional arguments are actually important for us. So let's go ahead with an example wherein we had printed a number of values. Okay, I could show the program as well to you, but if you look at this particular example, here what had happened was, so what happened over here was there were two arguments that we are actually passing. Now while we are talking to passing only two arguments, now the two arguments were message and the number. Now even if I pass arguments in the wrong order, the function actually could receive them. Something went wrong in this particular variable called as range, because we could not carry out that operation of range on a string. But then arguments could have been passed in any order. Let's go to the example that we had seen last time. Now if you look at these examples that we had seen last time, now in this particular example, what's happening is we have some variables. We have a function called a simple interest in which I am supposed to pass principal interest, number of years, rate of interest, and number of years. And depending on what values we have passed, we are going to calculate the amount. That is the simple interest amount is what we plan to calculate. Now suppose user gives a call to this particular function by saying 100 is the principal amount, 10 is the interest rate, and 2 is the number of years. Now over here, it was important that the first argument has to be the principal amount, the second argument has to be the rate of interest, and the third parameter, the argument that we pass, has to be number of years. But in this particular example, if you look at, it really doesn't matter even if the order changes. That means if I run this particular code, we get how much is the interest. Interest is rupees 20 if I invest 100 rupees at the rate of 10% for 2 years. But suppose while giving a call to this particular function, I had passed arguments in the wrong order. Suppose if I had passed 2, 100, and then 10. That means I'm saying I'm going to invest for 2 years, 100 rupees at the rate of 10%. Suppose if I had given a call in the wrong order, so even if I had given a call in the wrong order, it doesn't really matter. But because in this example, we are just multiplying those arguments and dividing that particular value with 100. So we are getting the right answer. But that's not always going to be the case. Let's take another example. Suppose instead of simple interest, we are now calculating, suppose instead of simple interest, we are now calculating compound interest. Now suppose if I'm calculating compound interest, and now I'm supposed to calculate compound interest, so I have given the formula for compound interest, principal amount into NSP into 1 plus R upon 100 raised to N, note star raised to N. So that's a complex formula now. Now here, if I'm investing 100 rupees at the rate of 10% for 2 years, and if I go on to calculate the interest, the interest comes out to be 21 rupees, because the first year we had 10 rupees as the interest and 1 rupee is paid as the compounding interest that has been paid for us. That's additional 1 rupee that we have now got. But suppose in this particular function call, what happens is if I mistakenly change the order, because there are too many arguments that have to be passed, and I forget, I passed the principal amount, interest, number of years, and the amount that is to be invested. So what has happened wrong over here is now the order has changed. I have passed data in the wrong order. Now if I pass data in the wrong order, what's going to happen? Look at that. I'm getting 62 rupees as the interest, wherein I was supposed to get only 21 rupees as the interest, because what has been considered now here, this 100 has been considered as years, because the first argument will be assigned to the first parameter, the second argument will be assigned to the second parameter, the third argument will be assigned to the third parameter. Now it is a nightmare kind of scenario for you are the designer of this particular class, of this particular function, but then somebody else is going to use your function. That somebody else who is using your function, he is not just required to know the name of the function, he is required to know what's the first argument, what's the second argument, what's the third argument. When there are 2-3 arguments, that's still manageable. But think about a function in which if I was passing 4-5 arguments, okay, and then I had to keep in mind not just what arguments are to be passed, I have to keep in mind what order the arguments are being passed. Now that definitely is going to be a nightmare kind of scenario for anybody who plans to call this particular function. Because if I go wrong in giving the call to that particular function, now in this case, I passed years first, principal amount later, and interest after that. Now if this is again a wrong call, I'm not going to get 21. Here it has paid me now 2000 rupees as interest. अरे 100 रुपए इन्वेस्ट किए 10% से 2 साल किए and you get 2000 is the interest. Now this could be the best investment for anybody to make. Things are actually going wrong. Now to address to this issue, we have this particular concept. We have this concept called as keyword arguments. In keyword arguments, what we do is We can also call function using keyword arguments, passing each argument in the form name is equal to value. Now, what is this name? Whatever was the name of your parameter, that parameter is to assign a value. Because you know, compound interest, if I have to calculate, I have to pass three values. The three values are principal amount, number of years, and rate of interest. So I definitely know for sure what is to be passed. The only place where we can possibly go wrong is the order in which they have to be passed. So such problem can be easily handled by using these keyword arguments. It is possible to mix positional and keyword arguments both, but positional arguments cannot appear after the keyword arguments. So if you look at this example, here I had three arguments, parameters, P1, P2, and P3. Suppose there is a function. There are three parameters. Now I said 30. Now this 30 will get assigned to the first one. Then P2 is equal to 4. That would get assigned to P2. And P3 is equal to 10. That would get assigned to P3. The positional argument has to appear before the keyword arguments. That's the only requirement that we have. Now, if I do something like this, if I pass the positional argument, that's 30, that gets assigned to P1, and then I take P2, that's assigned to this, then again, if I use a positional argument, that will generate an error. Okay, so let's take an example that will demonstrate how this particular thing can actually work. Now, if I go to the last example, wherein we are calculating simple interest, here and here we've got the same result. Because over here the formula was such that it doesn't really matter in what order we are passing. But still, if I had to use positional argument, keyword arguments, how would I pass? I would have said, get simple interest, principal amount is equal to 100, interest rate is equal to 10, years equal to 2. Now that also becomes easy for anybody who looks at your function call. It becomes easy as to what you are passing and what's the value for that particular data that we have passed. So when I give a call, look at the right hand side, we have got simple interest as 20. Likewise, I will change the order now. Here, the first was principal, interest rate, and years. Now I'm giving an order as interest rate, number of years, and principal amount. I have changed the order. And with the change order also, if I give a call, I still get the same answer. 20 is what I have got. Now, here what am I doing? I'm mixing both. This is the positional argument, whereas these two are keyword arguments. Now, positional means because assume that you now remember that the first argument that was to be passed was principal amount, assume. But what you are now getting confused is between the next two arguments. You, for some reason, you could not recollect what are the next two arguments that were to be passed. For whatever reason, you could not recollect. Array, second argument year tha ya number of interest tha. That's okay. Since you are very sure the first argument was number of principal amount, you pass it as positional directly. And the rest two arguments where there was a confusion, you could just use keyword arguments. Whatever was the parameter name inside this particular function, the same parameter name I'm using over here in the arguments, and I'm giving a call. Look at that. When I give a call, it still gives me the correct answer, that is 20. Now, if I mess it up, I use positional or keyword arguments first, then a positional argument, and then again a keyword argument. That would generate an error. This is something which is not allowed. You cannot pass. It says positional argument cannot be followed by keyword argument. So this is my keyword argument, and positional argument has come over here. Not just over here, it cannot even come at the end. It cannot come after any keyword argument. Suppose if I pass 10 also here, in any case, if I pass positional arguments after the keyword arguments, it's going to generate an error. Now, in this particular example, this particular feature did not make much sense. But in the compound interest example, it definitely makes a lot of difference. Now, here we go. In the compound interest, when we had just changed the order mistakenly, the results went wrong. So here, the best way to call such kind of function where order of parameters is actually very important, because if you're going to calculate principal amount, if you're going to calculate compound interest, it's important as per the definition of this function, necessary for you to pass the principal amount first, interest later, and years later. So I'm saying year equal to 2, principal amount equal to 100, interest equal to 10. Had I passed luckily in the correct order, then there was no issue. But then you have to memorize the order. So if I give a call, 21 rupees is what I got. Now I'm passing the values in the incorrect order, but I know for sure what is to be passed. The only thing that I could not recollect is in what order to be passed. In such cases, we could always go in for this keyword arguments. Now if I run the value program, I get the correct answer. So this was what we had to discuss about keyword arguments, if positional argument and keyword arguments. So here, what we had talked about was positional. It is important. The first will get assigned to the first. The second will get assigned to the second. Here again, we looked at the same. We looked at the same case. The first argument will get assigned to the first parameter. Second argument will get assigned to the second parameter. The third argument will get assigned to the third parameter. That was positional. And here, what I had used was keyword. So I had used these keywords, and to this particular keywords, I have actually passed those arguments. So this was one style that we could actually go ahead using. Okay, what else could we do now? Okay, what else could we do? Now, what I'm going to do now, I will continue with the further discussion and look at one more type of arguments that we can actually pass. Now, what is the other kind of argument that we can actually pass, called as default argument values? So let's understand what this concept of default argument values is all about. Default arguments. What we have been looking at earlier was keyword and positional. Now we have default arguments. Now, what is this default arguments? Now, what actually happens at times is, while we are giving a call, you may forget to pass some argument. Now, if you forget to pass some argument, there is some default value that should actually get passed and assigned to that particular parameter. The variable name that appears in the function definition header is called as parameter, and what we passed is called as argument. So in case if you forget to pass some kind of value, or you intentionally do not pass some value, there is some default value that should get substituted. For some function, you may want to make some parameters optional and use default values in case user does not want to provide them values for them. So user forgets, or user does not want to give a value. We want some default value to get substituted over there, and that can be done by using default function argument. And how do you specify default argument? You just have to put an equal to wherever that parameter has been defined inside the function definition. We just have to add equal to, and that will do the work for us. So let us see as to how we can add. Note that default argument should be a constant. You cannot have a variable. So I have a function called as greet. What is important for you to pass is the name of the particular person to which whom we are greeting. That is something which is important. Okay, so I'm saying def greet. Name is an argument that we have passed. Message is another argument that we are passing. So there are two arguments, names and message. But note, the second argument has a default value by saying equal to good morning. So when I'm saying equal to good morning, that's an argument that we are passing. But then here, this argument now, this parameter now becomes optional. That means while give you a call, you may pass this, you may not pass this. Name is now a argument which is compulsory for us. That is a required argument. That is something that we have to pass. So name over here now becomes required argument, and message over here now becomes a optional argument. So we can also call them required and optional. So this is required, whereas this is optional argument. So let's have a look at the call. We give a call to greet. I pass Raju. I also pass how do you do. So when I pass both the things, Raju is a argument that will get assigned to the parameter name. How do you do is an argument that will get assigned to message. Now, since you have passed, then this optional one, the default one will not come into action. The message will be, hello Raju, how do you do? But next time if I pass only Raju, so what I have passed is only the name, that is a required argument. What is missing is the message. So at that particular pace, the good morning will automatically get substituted. So that's the concept of default argument. So, and there is also something called mutable, but I'll come to this mutable default argument later. Let me give you a demonstration of this default argument first. So let's take an example of default argument. I have this function called as greetings, okay, in which name and message. Note, there is no argument, no parameter with equal to sign. That means both of them are required arguments. So there is no way I can give a call to this function greeting by passing any one of these arguments. That's not possible. So suppose if I define this function and kept ready in the memory, this function is ready in the memory. Now it's time for us to run this particular function. So I'm going to give a call to this function. Watch on the right hand side. I'm going to give a call to this particular function called as greetings. So I'm going to call this function greetings, and note I did not pass any argument. It just says errors. It says greeting missing two required positional arguments, name and message. So it's saying there are two arguments that you are supposed to pass and you have forgot to pass. So I pass only one argument. I pass only Raju. This is what I pass. So I pass, it says one missing required positional argument, that is message. So that call is also wrong. So I'm going to have Shantanu with us. So let's greet Shantanu. So I'm going to say Shantanu, and I'm going to say good evening. Now when I say good evening to Shantanu, so you see what's happening. It says hello Shantanu, good evening. It has correctly gone ahead displaying. So it's saying hello Shantanu, good evening. That means in this particular function, both the arguments were required arguments. You cannot call this particular function just by one or no argument. Every time you give a call to this function, you are required to pass two arguments compulsory, no choice. But if you look at the second function called as greet, here name is a required argument, but message is an optional argument. That means you may pass, you may not pass. If you pass, good. But if you don't pass, good morning is going to get printed automatically. That is going to get substituted. So we have defined this particular function. Let's give a call to this particular function called as greet. So I call greet. I do not pass any argument. Note what does it say? It required one missing positional argument name. So actually there were two arguments, but it's giving an error for us only for one argument. It says one argument is missing, and which one is missing? Name is missing. So let's now give a call to this particular function with that particular one argument which is missing. Suppose if I go on to wish Tushar, so I'm going to say greet Tushar now. So I say greet, and I say Tushar, Tushar. So I'm greeting Tushar. So while I'm greeting Tushar, I'm not passing the message. No issues. So it says, hello Tushar, good morning. But suppose if I had passed message, then the default will not come into action. So I say good evening. So I say good evening, and I run this particular code. So while I run this particular code, look at this. Hello Tushar, good evening. That has got displayed. So the second argument over here is now a optional argument. Now it's for you. If you want, you can pass. If you don't pass, if you don't pass, there is some default value that is going to go ahead substituting. So how do you specify this default argument? Nothing special. You just have to say equal to and good morning, and that's it. Nothing else. Equal to and the constant. Another important thing is that it has to be only a constant. It cannot be a variable over here. So the value that we specify to the argument parameter, that's a default value that we have to give, that always has to be a constant. You cannot have anything other than constant. So that was all about the default functional argument. Now we are going to look at something more complex. Now what is that something more complex? Let's have a look at the note first and then go ahead. I'm now going to talk about something called as mutable default argument. Now what is this mutable default argument? Mutable is something which can change. I am contradicting myself. Just now, even before even 1 minute has not passed, I said the value that we assign to default value that we assign to that particular function parameter, any parameter has to be a constant. Constant means something which we cannot change. And I'm now contradicting myself. I'm now saying mutable default argument. Mutable means something that can be changed. So let's see what exactly it means. The default arguments are evaluated once when the function is defined, not each time the function is called. Okay. So now this is something very difficult to understand. What does it say? Default arguments are evaluated when the function is defined, not each time when the function is called. That means normally in languages like C, C++, it all depends upon when we define that particular function. When we call that particular function, some data is going to get passed. Okay. Not each time the function is called. Okay. Whereas these default arguments are going to get whatever the mutable default argument that we passed, it will now be evaluated when that function has been defined right at the beginning, first time. When I select or when I create that function object, that time itself it will get evaluated. What does it mean? Let's understand. This means that if you use a mutable default argument that mutate it, mutate means you change it. You will have a mutated object for all future calls to the function as well. That means if I pass such argument, once it is changed, that change will be available for all future times as well. That means it's not changed only once, forever it has changed. That means for every subsequent value also, the value has actually got changed. Okay, so let's have an example of this mutable function argument. Now have a look at this particular example and tell me the result that we'll get. I'll clear the console first. Here we go. So there is a function called as append2, in which I have an element and there is some variable called as 2. This variable 2 has been initialized with an empty list. So whenever we give a call to this particular function, element is compulsory, 2 is optional. That means even if you don't pass, you're going to have an empty list over here as a second argument. So if I'm going to have it as a second argument, I say append.element and I'm going to return this particular list. So my question to you is what will get printed in the first list and what will get printed in the other list. So there are two different lists. One is my list and another list. While we are giving a call, what will print in both the things. So what's going to happen over here? When we give a call to this append2, we pass value 12. 12 was received in this default argument. 12 was received in this positional argument, which was compulsory, required argument, whereas 2 was not passed. So what has been used over here is this empty list that has been used. So this to empty list, we are appending number 12 and we are returning that particular list. So what we are going to now get is a list which has a single value that is 12. But during the next call, what we actually done is we are passing 42. So if I'm passing 42, what was expected was element should receive 42, and now we have not passed the second argument. So second argument should be this empty list. That does not happen when it comes to Python. In Python, once that mutable argument, we have used a mutable argument over here. Lists are mutable. Last time in the last example, we had taken up over here a string constant is what we have taken. Whereas in this particular example, we are taking a list, and list is mutable. Now, since it is mutable, whatever changes that has happened during the previous call, that will remain. So next time when you pass value 42, what we normally expected was a list which contains only a single number 42. Now that is not going to happen. The previous list in which the number 12 was added, to the same list, number 42 will also get added. And that is precisely what I mean when I state this. Yes, this means that if you use mutable default argument and mutate it, okay, you will have mutated object for all future calls to the function as well. That means next time when we are giving a call to the function, here when I pass 12, this 12 was added to this list by this particular statement. So the value has been mutated, changed. So during the subsequent call, you're going to get the changed value. So let's do it and see. This is a function and this is appropriate. Here there is no problem. We got the real value, that is only 12. We got the correct answer, that is 12. Till here it was okay. But when I give a call over here, look what has happened now. What we are getting is 1242. Whereas what we expected was only 42 inside this list. I really did not expect two values like 12 and 42, both of them, because here this is what it says. This means that if you use mutable default argument and mutate it, that means if you change that default argument, you will have mutated that object for all future calls. This is important, for all future calls to that function as well. That means the next call, what we are going to have is the mutated value of this particular argument. But if I want this particular thing to work right, then how do I go ahead? We could design this particular function slightly different fashion. What I could do is, I could say 2 equal to none. Instead of using a mutable object over here, I say none, nothing. That means there is second argument, but we are not passing those second argument. I have defined this particular function. If 2 is none, that means if I have not passed the second argument, then I'm going to take an empty list. So every time when nothing is passed, a new empty list will get created. And to that new empty list, we're going to append the value, and that new empty list will now be returned. Okay, so let's keep this thing ready. Now run this particular code once again. We are going to give a call to this particular function once again. And remember, you may be wondering, "Arey sir, ek hi naam ke do functions." Yesterday we looked at the introduction to functions in Python. If I define a new function with exactly the same name as the previous one, the previous function will now be overwritten and only the new function will be available. So I say append to 12. Now when I say append to 12, "Arey last time iska bhi to answer sahi aaya tha. Problem was over here." Now when I say append to 12, what's going to happen when I give a call to this particular function, append to 42? Let's see the result. When I run this code, it says just say 42. What has happened? 42 was passed. That was received over here. We did not pass the second argument, so that was anyway none. That was anyway none. And it's checking if 2 is none, if the second argument is none. If the second argument is none, then it says 2 is equal to empty list. That's a new list object that is there. And to this empty list object, we have appended the element 42, and that list has now been written. And that's how we get the result. Passing arguments to a function. Now we are going to look at all the different combinations that we can have. The rule says the first argument, that means the keyword argument cannot come before the positional. So the first argument that we can pass is positional. After that, we can have keyword argument. And look at the third and fourth. There is something very different. It says star ARG and star KWARG. Now that's something different. We have not yet discussed the star ARG and star KWARG is something that we have not yet discussed. So now we plan to discuss the third and the fourth type of argument. We have now finished with the discussion of the first and the second. The first was positional. Second was default argument parameter. The first was positional parameter. Second was the default. And third and fourth is something that we have not discussed. So positional are compulsory, are mandatory, and have no default value. Keyword arguments have optional value and are optional and have a default value. So now here we are given keyword is equal to some value. So that is having some kind of default values. So we have specified that. So now let's have a look at the third and fourth. What is the third and what's the fourth one? Arbitrary argument in the list is optional and has no default value. So something like arbitrary. And the fourth, arbitrary keyword argument dictionary is optional and has no default value. Now we are going to focus on the second, third, and the fourth. We have finished on the first and second parameters. The third and fourth type of things are what we're going to look at now. So positional argument, just a quick recap. Use this when there are only few function arguments which are fully which are fully part of the function's meaning, which is with a natural order. So there are one or two arguments. If I had to add two numbers, so that's very obvious. Those numbers are to be added. So I'm just going to pass first number and the second number. So when there are very few arguments and it's very obvious in what order you're going to pass, in those cases we could have taken up this particular positional arguments, all of which are compulsory. So I say message and recipient. So in our point X and Y value is what we have to pass. So when we talk about a point, we normally say we define a point in terms of X and Y only. So it's very obvious what are those things to be passed. And it's not difficult for us to remember what's the order in which those arguments are to be passed. Keyword arguments, where there are more than when there are more than 2-3 arguments that will be passed, it actually becomes difficult for us to remember in what order those arguments are to be passed. In that case, keywords are quite helpful. Say I had to send a message and that message was to be sent to 2, like what you do in email, then CC, then BCC. अरे 2 तो याद है, but बाद में CC और बाद में BCC courtesy किसको देने कॉपी वो याद नहीं रहेगा. तो in that case what we have done is CC को डालना and BCC को डालना. तो आपको जिसे मैसेज भेजना है वो तो भेजेगा, एडिशनली आपको जिसे भेजना है वो CC BCC जो रहेगा, that we have kept it as optional. So that's optional, which are keyword arguments is what we have, and they are optional. So I can give a name and I can pass arguments, or I can use a default value that has been used for them. Now we are now going to talk about arbitrary number of arguments. See, if I ask you to write a question, solution for a problem it says add two integers. Now it's very simple. You're going to say def addition n1 comma n2. If I say multiply integer, I can say def multiply n1 comma n2. Now that's so very obvious way to go ahead with. But suppose if I had told you add numbers, and I do not tell you how many numbers are to be added, then how do you define a function? And what's there in my mind? कि मैं 2 argument pass करने वाला या 200 argument pass करने वाला हूँ, that you really do not know. Such cases, what comes to your rescue is arbitrary arguments. So these are functions which takes in variable number of arguments. यानी यहाँ कंपल्शन नहीं है कि आपको एक ही पास करना है, 2 ही पास करना है, 3 ही पास करना है. Arbitrary means it can change. You do not know in advance the number of arguments that will pass to a function. This kind of thing can be handled with arbitrary number of arguments. What we just need to do is put an asterisk mark before that argument, and once we do that, that problem will be solved. When we define the right argument with this asterisk mark, what it actually does is arguments will be considered as a tuple of all remaining positional arguments. So what did it say? In the function body, arguments will be a tuple for all the remaining positional arguments. So rest of the arguments will be considered as a tuple. And so here we go. I say send message comma star args. अभी मैसेज किसे भेजना है, एक बंदे को भेजना है या 10 बंदे को भेजना है, आपको मालूम नहीं है. तो एक को भेजना है तो I could have just said message comma name, what we had said. But now I'm saying star args, so I can give n number of arguments to which I would like to send this message. So I said send message 42 to Bob, to Tom, to Jay, तीनों को ये message भेज देगा. In the program function body, that arg is considered as a tuple, and tuples are iterable, so we can iterate through those tuples. So args allows us to pass variable number of arguments of non-keyword arguments, number of non-keyword arguments to a function. Non-keyword, यानी आप ये नहीं बता सकते ये name है या address है, ऐसा नहीं बता सकते. You can just pass those arguments one after another by putting a comma between them. Look at this function. I say def adder star number. So when I'm saying star number, internally in the program it's taken as a tuple. Now this tuple can actually receive any number of arguments. Forget about this function definition. Look at this function call adder 3 5, adder 4 5 6 7, adder 1 2 3 4 5 6. Array, first time 2 arguments, next 4 arguments, next 5 arguments I'm passing. No issues. If I pass 2 or 4 of these, they will be considered, they will be received in this particular tuple, and I'm just iterating through tuple to get those values. If I say def greet star names, so if I pass Monica, Sonika, Sahil and Leela, this will be considered as a tuple. Names will be a tuple which is pointing to all these names, and I can just run a loop to access all those names. Okay. So let's take some examples of this arbitrary number of arguments. Let's look at this. There is a function called as fun that I have defined, in which I have args. But note, how is this parameter defined? Star args. So when I say star args, it actually becomes arbitrary number of arguments. It's inside the body of the function. It is considered to be a tuple. So I say args, that is going to print the tuple, and the tuple ka length kitna hai, to length of args. So I'm going to just print how many arguments are being passed. So there is this function called as fun, and I give a call to this particular function fun. I give a call to this function fun. It says it's an empty tuple whose length is 0. Okay. I'm now going to pass some arguments 1, 2, 3. So when I pass 3 arguments, it says it's a tuple in which there are 3 arguments. So that's how it's working. So I pass fun 1, 2, 3. If I say fun 1, 2, 3, if I say 1, 2, 3, it says 3 arguments. If I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, it says note what has happened. I have passed inside this function bracket, I have passed again a tuple. So that tuple entirely has been taken as one argument. So it becomes a tuple with a single argument. Can you see this single argument and comma, single value tuple, which has a comma always at the end after that argument. So it has created only a single argument. But if I really wanted to pass those 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 5, if I had not used these brackets, then that's a different story. If I had not used brackets, then that's a different story. Look at that. Now it says length as 4. But if I use bracket, that means one tuple was been passed, because you can pass any kind of data. If I wanted to pass the values inside that particular tuple, I have a choice. I could just say star 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, just to make you understand, I'm going to have one more example that will help you understand this syntax. Here I go. Now it's correctly taking those. When I say star, that means the values inside that particular tuple. Let's understand with this. I have a tuple in which there are 3 values, 1, 2, 3. I say fun of t. I'm going to pass a single tuple. I'm not passing multiple arguments this time around. I'm passing a single tuple. So if I have this tuple in which there is 1, 2, 3, I pass a single tuple. So my function length is only, argument length is only 1. That means only one argument was passed. But if I say star t, then values inside the tuples are passed. So that what makes the difference while I pass that argument if I use the star and so on. Now, I have another function called as adder. I'll come to this particular parse function later. I have another function called as adder. Inside this adder function, I have count, that's positional argument, and that's compulsory. And the second one is star args. So there are 2 arguments we are passing. One is count and second is star args. Star args over here is arbitrary argument that we are trying to pass. Okay, that will be inside the body of the function. It will be treated as a tuple. So this adder can add any number of values. But note, the first positional argument will be compulsory. And this is our keyword argument. This is our arbitrary number of arguments that we want to pass. So let's come to this particular function number adder. So I have a tuple. Inside this tuple, there are a lot of values. Look at that. There are a lot of values. It could be a nightmare for me to pass those values. I say adder. So I have created a tuple called as numbers. I'm saying adder 3. 3 is my count. 3 is my count. Okay, 3 is my count. I say 3 star numbers. So the star numbers means entire tuple is passed. So entire tuple is passed and total I got only 9. Why? Because this loop is running only till count. I say colon count. Count का value I pass 3. 3 means 0, 1, 2. So 0, 1, 2, 1 plus 3 plus 5 उतना ही add हो चुका है. For some reason, I wanted to add all the values. So if I wanted to add all the values, I would have defined this adder slightly in a different fashion. कैसे define करते हैं इस adder को? Let's have a look at it. I'm going to define this adder once again. I'm not going to say args का count. I'm going to say now here length of args because it's going to take it as array. So I'm just going to say length of args. Why even that? I may not even require this particular counter. ये count की मुझे ज़रूरत ही नहीं है. I can pass only a single argument. And here I'm going to cycle through all the arguments which are there. That's a tuple. So I can just iterate through the tuple and get the total of all the elements. So I have another version of adder in which there is only a single argument. Now let's give a call to this particular function adder and I pass these numbers. That's a tuple that I pass. All values inside the tuple. Note star over here. I pass values inside the tuple. I got answer as 407. And what's that 407? It's addition of all these numbers that are there. So I could define, I can have a combination. I can have positional argument along with arbitrary number of arguments. I can have only arbitrary number of arguments. Point kya hai? When you receive this arbitrary number of arguments when you have, inside the body of the function, it becomes a tuple with that number of values. It's just a tuple and you can just cycle through that particular tuple. So it gives you an opportunity for you to design a function in which you can pass any number of arguments, Such kind of operations can be done by using this function. Now, let's take one more example of this arbitrary. I would like to find the largest value which is there. Largest string I would like to find. So I say star args. I say find longest. Max length is 0. Max string is none. And what am I doing? For element in args, args is my tuple now. For element in args, I'm going to cycle through all the elements. So first element का length greater than max length मैंने 0 रखा है. पहला मेरे पास a आएगा. a का length पहले 1 है. तो 1 greater than 0 है क्या? हाँ. तो यहाँ देखो क्या क्या हमने पैकिंग कर रहे, अनपैक कर रहे. यानी मैक्स लेंथ में असाइन क्या? लेंथ ऑफ एलिमेंट 1 है और एलिमेंट क्या है? तो a. ये मैक्स स्ट्रिंग में स्टोर हो गया. अगेन लूप चलेगा, सेकंड बीबी लिया जाएगा, बीबी में 2 है तो दिस कंडीशन अगेन ट्रू, तो लेंथ में 2 आएगा, मैक्स स्ट्रिंग में बीबी आएगा। फिर सी, अगेन द कंडीशन इज ट्रू, तो मैक्स लेंथ में 3 आएगा, मैक्स स्ट्रिंग में सी आएगा। देन आई हैव 5 टाइम डी, 5 टाइम डी का लेंथ इज 5 ग्रेटर देन मैक्स लेंथ, दैट इज प्रीवियस मैक्स लेंथ वाज 3, उससे बड़ा है क्या, तो इन दैट केस मैक्स लेंथ में आएगा 5, यहाँ आएगा डी 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 डी। अगली बार ई पास हो रहा है, पास हो रहा है मीन्स एरे में इटरेट हो रहा है, तो वाइल इट इज इटरेटिंग टू दैट पर्टिकुलर एरे, इन दिस केस मैक्स लेंथ में वैल्यू आएगा, ये कंडीशन फॉल्स ही रहेगा, बिकॉज मैक्स लेंथ ऑफ द एलिमेंट अभी 3 है और आपका मैक्स लेंथ 5 है, तो दिस कंडीशन भी फॉल्स, तो यहाँ जाके डायरेक्टली मैक्स स्ट्रिंग रिटर्न किया जाएगा, दैट्स डी। तो लेट्स रन दिस पर्टिकुलर कोड एंड सी डज इट वर्क इन द एक्सपेक्टेड फैशन। हमने रन कर लिया एंड देन आई रन दिस पर्टिकुलर कोड, देन आई रन दिस कोड, ये कहता है आपका मैक्सिमम स्ट्रिंग कौन सी है, तो मैक्स स्ट्रिंग डी 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 इज द मैक्सिमम स्ट्रिंग विच इज देयर, arbitrary number of arguments. Let's try and debug the code and see, can we debug this particular code and see the behavior, how it is working, ये loop कैसे चल रहा है, can we debug it and see. I'm going to give a call to this particular function, so I give a call to this particular function from here, that is also what I'm going to debug, इसे भी हम लोग debug कर लेते हैं। Let's call this particular function, debug this particular code and see the behavior step by step, अगर देख पाए तो let's have a look at it. Here I come, I give a call to this particular function print. Oh, I'll do a small change over here. I'll stop this and then I'll assign it to a variable. I'll say var is equal to this and I'm going to print var because I do not want to debug print method. So I'm going to say print var. ऐसा कुछ कर लेते हैं. I'm going to say print var. So I'm here. I run till this particular statement var तक आ जाता हूँ. Debug करना शुरू कर लिए. यहाँ आ गए var तक. Now I give a call. Def में कॉल किया, here we come, we are going to give a call to this function, इसमें आ गए, मैक्स लेंथ का वैल्यू 0 है, यहाँ वेरिएबल्स देख लेते चाहे तो, everybody pay attention on the right hand side, देखो ये क्या है, args is a tuple, everybody pay attention on the right hand side, args क्या है तो tuple है, tuple में क्या है, टाइप 5 है, उसमें वैल्यूज कौन कौन से हैं, वैल्यूज ए बी सी डी एंड आखिरी में ई वगैरह करके लास्ट वैल्यू है, ए बी सी डी ई करके वैल्यू है, दीज आर 5 वैल्यूज। मैक्स लेंथ का वैल्यू इनिशियली 1 है, साइज 1 है, वैल्यू 0 है, पे अटेंशन भैया। तो मैक्स स्ट्रिंग में क्या है, मैक्स स्ट्रिंग में नन टाइप है, कुछ नहीं है, नन है और नथिंग, इट्स नॉट पॉइंटिंग एनीवेयर। आगे चलते हैं, फॉर एलिमेंट इन ARGS, नाउ व्हेन आई से एलिमेंट इन ARGS, एलिमेंट विल द फर्स्ट एलिमेंट दैट वी आर पासिंग। अब इसमें का पहला एलिमेंट कौन सा रहेगा, एलिमेंट फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम, एलिमेंट फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम, लेट मी टेक इट डाउन, एलिमेंट फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम विल बी इन A, element for the first time will be A, so it will cycle through it, element for the first time is A, we are here, it will cycle, देखिए एलिमेंट में A आ चुका है, A का लेंथ कितना है तो 1 है, तो 1 ग्रेटर देन 0 है क्या, 1 ग्रेटर देन 0 है क्या, यस, तो मैक्स लेंथ का वैल्यू 1 हो गया एंड मैक्स स्टेयर में A स्टोर हो गया, नोट कीजिएगा मैक्स स्टेयर में A स्टोर हो गया। अब दूसरा स्टेयर क्या है, स्ट्रिंग क्या एलिमेंट क्या है, BB है, BB का लेंथ कितना है तो 2 है, 2 ग्रेटर देन मैक्स लेंथ है क्या, हाँ, अगर कंडीशन ट्रू है तो आगे गए। अब इस बार मैक्स लेंथ हो गया BB, वॉच करो, मैक्स लेंथ हो गया BB और मैक्स लेंथ का मैक्स स्ट्रिंग हो गया BB, उसका लेंथ 2 है। अगली बार मेरा एलिमेंट रहेगा CCC 3 वाला, वॉच करो CCC आ गया, अगली बार एलिमेंट CCC है, तो आई लेंथ ऑफ एलिमेंट कितना है, CC का 3 है, 3 ग्रेटर देन 2 है क्या, हाँ, तो कंडीशन में गए, अब मैक्स लेंथ बन गया 3 और मैक्स स्ट्रिंग बन गया CCC। अगला पास है, यहाँ देखते रहो, वेरिएबल एक्सप्लोरर में देखते रहो, इट्स गोना शो यू एवरीथिंग। नेक्स्ट आई गो अहेड एंड नाउ योर एलिमेंट इज डी, अपना एलिमेंट है, उसका लेंथ कितना है तो 5 है, 5 ग्रेटर देन 3 है क्या, यस, दैट्स आल्सो ट्रू, तो अभी मैक्स लेंथ क्या बन गया 6 और मैक्स स्ट्रिंग कौन सा है तो डी। नाउ आई प्रोसीड फर्दर, इस बार एलिमेंट कौन सा है तो आपका ई का लेंथ 3 है, 3 ग्रेटर देन 6 है क्या, कंडीशन फॉल्स है तो बॉडी में नहीं जाएंगे, वी कम आउट ऑफ एलिमेंट इन ARGS, खत्म हो गए सारे एलिमेंट्स, हमने ट्रैवर्स कर लिए 5 के 5, अब रिटर्न कर रहे हैं मैक्स स्ट्रिंग में क्या है तो डी, सो दैट इज बीइंग रिटर्न, ये रिटर्न कर दिया, फंक्शन कॉल हो गया, ये रिटर्न हो गया, रिटर्न होके हमने इसे प्रिंट किया, सो दैट्स व्हाट वी कैन डू मैक्स। ओके, और आई वेंट इनटू फंक्शन प्रिंट, इसके अंदर नहीं जाना चाहिए था, बट एनीवे यहाँ से रिटर्न करके बाहर आ गया और यहाँ प्रिंट क्या किया तो डी हैज बीन प्रिंटेड। So that's best how we can trace this particular code and see the result. Okay, that was all about the arbitrary number of arguments that we had to pass. Now let's proceed further now, and let's talk about something more. So mutable हो गया हमारा, इसमें से हमारा पोजिशनल हो गया, कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट हो गया, कीवर्ड में डिफॉल्ट वैल्यू हो गया, अब ये आर्बिट्री नंबर ऑफ आर्गुमेंट्स हो चुका है. Now what we need to look at this keyword arguments, and that too arbitrary number of keyword arguments. What is this? Let's have a look at this keyword arguments. Okay. This was also compulsory. These two are compulsory, whereas these two are optional. अगर आपने पास किया तो okay, नहीं पास किया तो none. That's how it was. So let's take the star KRJs. We talked about this as well. ये भी हमने डिस्कस कर लिया. अगर यही एग्जाम्पल रन करके देखना था, we could have created this example as well to carry out that particular operation. Let's do this once and see. अगर send this particular message to this particular fellow, तो यही एग्जाम्पल एक बार इम्प्लीमेंट करके देखते हैं. ओके, ग्रीटिंग्स के साथ ही लेट्स इम्प्लीमेंट दैट एग्जाम्पल. सपोज आई नाउ से dev, I say send and whatever is my message. तो मैसेज आपका कंपलसरी है, बट किसको भेजना है? तो आई गोन से नेम्स. तो जितने लोगों को भेजना है उनके नाम आप बताइए. तो whatever names you pass, to all those names the message will be sent. So I run a loop now here for name in names. I'm gonna say print name, comma, message. That's what I'm saying. Now when I define such a program function, let's see what happens. The function has been defined. I say send. It generates an error. Message देना ज़रूरी है. तो अगर मैसेज देना ज़रूरी है तो आई सेंड मैसेज. तो मैसेज मैं भेजता हूँ, यहाँ मैसेज में भेजता हूँ बाय डिफ़ॉल्ट से you have got a mail. ऐसा, you have got a mail. तो नो आउटपुट. अरे बोल किसको मैसेज भेजना है आपने बताया नहीं है, तो आउटपुट कहाँ से आएगा? Now I'm gonna send message to few of them. I'm gonna send message to few of them. मैंने कहा send, वही एग्जांपल लेते हैं. You have got a mail, and I'm gonna send this message. You have got a mail to suppose Bob and Tom. Yeah, Bob have got a mail. Okay, what you have लिखना था मुझे, तो मेरा मैसेज गलत था. Anyway, you have got a mail. तो मैं टाइप कुछ गलत किया हूँ. Anyway, have got a mail. You have got a mail. You have got a mail. ऐसा कॉल किया तो ऐसे बॉब you have got a mail, Tom you have got a mail. तो जितने नेम पास करोगे आप, बॉब, टॉम एंड सपोज सैम, 3 लोग हैं, तो तीनों को मैसेज आएगा. बॉब you have got a mail, Sam, Tom you have got a mail, Sam you have got a mail and kind of thing. तो this is what we have seen. Now we are going to look at another aspect. और ये नया दूसरा एस्पेक्ट क्या है? What we are going to look at is arbitrary keyword argument that is dictionary. What is this? Let's have a look at this particular concept. Arbitrary keyword argument. What exactly does it mean? Star KWARGSS. KW keyword, ARGS argument. यानी keyword arguments है. Keyword argument, it allows us to pass variable length of keyword arguments. अरे अगर वेरिएबल लेंथ ऑफ कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट्स है तो हमने यहाँ कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट का एक एग्जांपल देखा था अभी नोट्स में. तो लेट मी जस्ट शो यू एन एग्जांपल ऑफ कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट. तो सपोज लेट्स टेक वन मोर एग्जांपल है. डेव सेंड मेल, वॉच इट, सेंड मेल. आई से ये मेरा मैसेज है जो मुझे भेजना है, MSG ये मेरा मैसेज है, जिसे भेजना है वो कंपलसरी है. CC ऑप्शनल है. देखो मैं क्या कह रहा हूँ, CC इज ऑप्शनल. CC में मैंने कहा फिलहाल तो नन, किसी को नहीं भेज रहा हूँ, आपने बताया तो. एंड BCC ये भी ऑप्शनल है, यहाँ भी कहा मैंने नन, वॉच इट, यहाँ भी कहा मैंने नन. तो कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट्स तो है ये दोनों. अरे बट फिक्स्ड है, 2 ही कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट्स आप पास कर सकते हैं, दैट डिफॉल्ट वैल्यूज है. तो यू कैन नॉट पास मोर ओवर हियर. तो आई राइट अ प्रोग्राम नाउ. आई वांट टू सेंड द मैसेज. So I'm going to print, or I'll run, I'll say print I'm saying sending message 2, comma 2, and message क्या है जो भेजे उसे, what are the messages, ऐसे msg, ओके, या अलग लिखते हैं ऐसे 2, यहाँ लिखते हैं मैसेज कॉम मैसेज, ये भेजा, एंड नेक्स्ट लिखते हैं इफ cc not none is not none, अगर नन नहीं है, मैसेज पास किया है तो उसे भी मैसेज भेजेंगे, उसे भी मैसेज भेजेंगे, टूटी की जगह मैं सीसी को भी मैसेज भेजूँ, एंड वैसे लिखते बीसीसी के लिए, अगर वो नन नहीं है यानी आपने कुछ पास किया है तो उन्हें भी मैसेज भेजेंगे, इफ यू वांट द मैसेज टू बी पास टू देम एज वेल। तो वॉच इट, तो मैंने कहा इफ बीसीसी नॉट नन देन पास मैसेज टू बीसीसी एज वेल, तीनों को मैसेज पास करेंगे। तो लेट्स कंपाइल दिस कोड एंड चेक इट एंड कीप इट रेडी। तो सिंटैक्स एरर क्या हुआ, if cc not none, if cc क्या हुआ, is not none, not none है, is not none. So I'm going to send a mail now, message now. I say send mail. I'm going to send mail. My message is make the payment. Make the payment मेरा मैसेज है, किसे भेजना है, ये मैसेज रवि को भेजना है, तो रवि को ये मैसेज भेज देना है। तो रवि मैसेज मेक द पेमेंट आ गया। आगे जाके रवि के बाद ये मैसेज मुझे सनी को भी भेजना था, तो मैंने कहा सनी, और फिर मैंने कहा टॉमी या टॉम को भी भेजना है। तो आ गया रवि मैसेज मेक द पेमेंट, सनी मैसेज मेक द पेमेंट, टॉम मैसेज मेक द पेमेंट। अरे बोल टॉम के बाद मुझे ये राम को भी भेजना था, बट इफ आई डू दैट इट्स गोना जनरेट एन एरर। इट सेज takes from 2 to 4 positional argument but 5 were given, यानी यहाँ 1 2 3 4 ही दे सकते हैं आप arguments, आप 5 दे रहे हैं, that's something which is not allowed. Now I would like to handle this issue as well, मुझे इस issue को भी handle करना है। तो now comes to our rescue, this concept as keyword arguments, arbitrary keyword arguments is what we have. So let's have a look at this arbitrary keyword arguments. What am I saying? I'm saying over here for function keyword argument star star kwrgs. Now when I'm saying star star kwrgs, it's actually passing a dictionary over here. So I can say keywords is what I can actually pass. So I'm passing keyword. Keyword क्या है? Key 1 is the keyword, उसका value 10. Key 2 या another keyword, उसका value 20, उसका value foo. तो I'm actually passing key value, और जितने चाहे आप पास कर सकते हैं, अभी जितने चाहे कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट्स पास कर सकते हैं, दैट विल बिकम अ डिक्शनरी, और इस डिक्शनरी में ये सारे स्टोर हो जाएंगे। तो आपने पास किया ये एक पेयर और ये दूसरा पेयर, एंड दैट विल बी टेकन एज डिक्शनरी हियर। एंड इस डिक्शनरी में पहला वैल्यू की 2, ये ऑर्डर डिक्शनरी में ऑर्डर डजंट मैटर, बट आर्गुमेंट्स आ जाएंगे। की 2 फू है, की 1 का वैल्यू क्या है, तो 10 है। इफ यू वांटेड टू रिटर्न जस्ट अ की वैल्यू, यूज मेथड कॉल्ड एज आइटम्स। तो आप यहाँ कह सकते थे फॉर की वैल्यू इन कीवर्ड डॉट आइटम्स, याद है डिक्शनरी, it will give you all the items. So items, it will give a tuple. So if it gives me a tuple, I'm going to iterate through that dict items. If you remember dict items के tuple dict item में से iterate करूँगा, उसमें से पहला pair इसमें assign किया जाएगा, फिर दूसरा तीसरा so and so. So I can get all the values which have been passed. So let's first see them, and then we'll look at the combination that we can actually go ahead using. तो लेट्स हैव एन एग्जांपल ऑफ here, or can I have a simpler example? Here is a simpler example. I say bars, keyword kwrgs, length of kwrgs. So there is one simple function that I have, bars. So I'm going to give a call to this particular function called as bars now. I did not pass anything. It says there is a dictionary which is empty, उसका length 0 है. Okay? तो अगली बार मैं bars में पास करता हूँ, मैं कहता हूँ मेरा एक key 1 है और उसका वैल्यू 10 है. तो कहता है अरे देखो एक डिक्शनरी क्रिएट हुई है, ये की है, इसकी वैल्यू है, उसकी लेंथ 1 है, यानी वो एक एलिमेंट है डिक्शनरी में. चलो 2 पास कर लेते हैं. तो मैंने कहा की 2 उसका वैल्यू 20 है, कॉमा की 3 इसका वैल्यू 30 है. तो पास 3 आर्गुमेंट्स. तो कहता है यार इसकी लेंथ 3 है, इसमें 3 कीज है, 1 2 और 3. आपकी मर्जी जितने आप पास करना चाहोगे. स्टार स्टार KWARGS. समझो मेरे पास एक डिक्शनरी थी पहले से. आई हैड ए डिक्शनरी. सो डिक्शनरी में था मेरे पास सपोज की 1 इज इक्वल टू 10, कॉमा की 2 इज इक्वल टू 20, की 2 इज इक्वल टू 20, 20 एंड कॉमा की 3 इज इक्वल टू 30. ऐसा एक डिक्शनरी है मेरे पास. अरे क्या हो गया? ये मेरा डिक्शनरी है, डिक्ट है. So I'm constructing a dictionary. 2 different ways to construct dictionary. Dict कहते तो डबल कोट डालने की जरूरत नहीं है. I have not said dict, तो डबल कोट डालेंगे. अभी देखते हैं. तो we have constructed dictionary. तो अगर डी प्रिंट करके देखो तो इसमें की वैल्यूज है. अब इसी को भी हम लोग बाज को भी पास कर सकते थे. तो बाज को मैंने पास किया, मेरा डी डिक्शनरी पास किया. इट सेज बाज ना, क्या फंक्शन बाज. इट सेज 0 पोजिशनल आर्गुमेंट बट 1 वाज गिवन. अरे क्या बात हुई, 0 पोजिशनल आर्गुमेंट. So there is something which is going wrong. So let's pass it in a different way. I say star this. The moment I pass star, क्या हुआ है? It says bash takes 0 position argument but 3 were given. अरे यार एक position argument आपको कितने देने हैं? 0. तो 3. Let me say star this and see what's happening. If I say star this, then it's working now. So if I pass a dictionary, that's also possible. But to pass a dictionary, neither you are going to just say D, neither you are going to say star D. We are going to say star D. So when I say star D, the values of the dictionary were passed, and those values have been received in this particular keyword arguments, in which each of the value that is there inside my dictionary, each pair becomes a key value combination that has been passed and assigned to this KWRGS. Let me take you additional examples of these keyword arguments. Have a look here. In this particular function, I have a positional argument and a positional argument, and in between I have a keyword arguments. So that's weird, huh? So between I have a keyword arguments. I give a call to this particular function in different ways. कैसे कॉल कर रहे हैं? मैंने यहाँ पोजिशनल आर्गुमेंट पास किया, फिर यहाँ और एक पोजिशनल आर्गुमेंट पास किया, और यहाँ मैंने एक टपल पास किया, यानी 3 वैल्यूज पास कर रहा हूँ. तो क्या होगा देखते हैं. तो 1 will get assigned to A, 4 will get assigned to B. हम तो स्टार KWRGS देख रहे हैं. What we are now looking at is something different. Let's take this. I have one required argument, then I have arbitrary number of arguments, and then I have star KWRGS. Watch it now. एक ऐसा फंक्शन हमने डिफाइन किया है, और इस फंक्शन को हम लोग कॉल करेंगे. फंक्शन का नाम क्या है? funk1. funk1 को कॉल किया विदाउट एनी पैरामीटर. कहता है एरर है, बिकॉज इसमें एक आर्गुमेंट कंपलसरी था. तो दैट्स समथिंग दैट वी डेफिनेटली हैव टू पास. ओके, तो मैं अलग तरीके से कॉल करता हूँ. funk1 को कॉल करता हूँ विथ सम आर्गुमेंट, आई पास 1. तो ये कॉल किया तो कहता है ओके ये सही कॉल हुआ. क्यों सही कॉल हुआ? बिकॉज यही कंपलसरी है. ये दोनों तो वैसे भी ऑप्शनल है. यहाँ आर्बिट्री 0 to n नंबर ऑफ आर्गुमेंट्स, यानी यहाँ जितने सारे डिक्शनरी में पास करना चाहेंगे उतने आर्गुमेंट्स आप पास कर सकते हो, योर चॉइस. ओके, सो दैट इज नॉट समथिंग विच इज कंपलसरी. तो मैं अभी 2 आर्गुमेंट पास कर सकता हूँ, 1, 2, 3, ऐसे 3 पास किए funk1 में. लेट्स सी व्हाट हैपेंस. दैट्स आल्सो ओके. डोंट वरी अबाउट द स्टेटमेंट एरर. ये यहाँ एरर दे रहा था, डोंट वरी अबाउट दैट. ये तीनों आर्गुमेंट सही पास हो रहे. तो यहाँ क्या हुआ, फर्स्ट इसमें आ गया और ये 1 और 2 तो एक ही इसमें रिसीव है. अब अपना स्टार स्टार KWRGS का क्या करेंगे? हाउ डू यूज देम? दैट इज व्हाट वी नीड टू रियली फोकस ऑन. तो कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट्स कैसे पास करें? आई हैव वन फंक्शन विच सेज एक कंपलसरी है, वन रिक्वायर्ड आर्गुमेंट, दूसरा पोजिशनल डिफॉल्ट अपना आर्बिट्री नंबर ऑफ आर्गुमेंट्स, एंड तीसरा आर्बिट्री है बट कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट्स है. So I'm going to print arbitrary arguments as well as the keyword arguments is what I want to print. This will help you to understand the concept in a much better way. अब इस फंक्शन में मैंने सिर्फ रिक्वायर्ड आर्गुमेंट पास किया, सिर्फ रिक्वायर्ड आर्गुमेंट पास किया तो रिक्वायर्ड में ARGS आ गया. मैंने ये कॉल दिया, देखो इस फंक्शन को, रिक्वायर्ड आर्गुमेंट आ गया. दैट वाज कंपलसरी. अगर ये नहीं पास करता मैं, इट वुड जनरेट एन एरर. इफ आई डिड नॉट पास दिस, दिस वुड जनरेट एन एरर. लुक एट दिस, इट जनरेट्स एन एरर बिकॉज एक आर्गुमेंट पास करना कंपलसरी था. अब मैंने एक आर्गुमेंट पास किया, फिर ये जो 1 2 है 1 2 3, अब देखते हैं 1 2 3. नाउ वेदर इज 1 2 3 विल बी रिसीव्ड हियर एंड हियर या ओनली इन ARGS, दैट्स समथिंग दैट वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड. तो मैंने दूसरा कॉल दिया, रिक्वायर्ड आर्गुमेंट्स आ गया, ये आपने रिक्वायर्ड आर्गुमेंट रिसीव हो गया, और ये 1 2 3 तीनों के तीनों स्टार ARGS में गया है, आर्बिट्री नंबर ऑफ आर्गुमेंट्स. तो कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट्स अगर आपको पास करने तो कैसे करोगे? उनके साथ कीवर्ड्स चाहिए. ये निक एक कीवर्ड है, ये इसकी वैल्यू है, ये कीवर्ड टू एक कीवर्ड है, ये इसकी वैल्यू है, ये रिक्वायर्ड आर्गुमेंट है, ये आर्बिट्री नंबर ऑफ आर्गुमेंट्स है, और ये आपके कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट्स है. अब देखते हैं इसे कॉल करके. व्हेन वी गिव कॉल टू दिस, रिक्वायर्ड आर्गुमेंट आपका रिक्वायर्ड आर्गुमेंट है, ARGS में आपका ये टपल है 1 2 एंड 3 वाला, और कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट में ये डिक्शनरी है. दैट्स हाउ वी गिव अ कॉल टू दिस काइंड ऑफ फंक्शंस, कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट्स. अब इसको यूज करके देखते हैं इन वन ऑफ द एग्जांपल्स. इसे यूज कर सकते हैं. मेरे पास एक स्टूडेंट की लिस्ट मैं पास करने वाला हूँ, उसका कट ऑफ मैं पास करूँगा. कट ऑफ 40% है, 60% है, सब स्टूडेंट्स के मार्क्स पास करूँगा. तो हम लोग चेक करेंगे स्टूडेंट के मार्क कट ऑफ से ज़्यादा है क्या. अगर है, उसी को पासिंग स्टूडेंट की लिस्ट में ऐड करेंगे, और 5 स्टूडेंट में वही स्टूडेंट रहेंगे जिनके मार्क्स कट ऑफ से ज़्यादा है. तो मैंने दिया कट ऑफ मार्क मेरा 40 है, अनिल को 66 मिले, सुनील को 55 मिला है, जय को 33 34 मिला है, और ली को 46 मिला है. तो ओनली जय डज नॉट मेक इट थ्रू. अब इसे अगर मैं कॉल करता हूँ तो वॉच इट, कैसे काम करेगा. तो यहाँ ये मेरा कंपलसरी है, पोजिशनल आर्गुमेंट है, ये सारे मेरे कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट्स है. देखो कॉल कर समय की एंड वैल्यू, की एंड वैल्यू, की एंड वैल्यू, ऑल ऑफ देम विल बी रिसीव्ड हियर, सबके सब यहाँ रिसीव हो जाएंगे. एंड मैं कहता हूँ नेम मार्क्स इन कीवर्ड आर्गुमेंट डॉट लिस्ट. ये डिक्ट आइटम्स के देता है आपको, लिस्ट है, उसको आप अनपैक करके यहाँ असाइन कर रहे हैं. टपल्स होते हैं उसके अंदर, उसको अनपैक करके यहाँ पर असाइन कर रहे हैं. एंड देन मार्क ग्रेटर इक्वल टू कट ऑफ, नेम में अनिल आ जाएगा, मार्क में 66 आ जाएगा. लूप में जब भी चलेंगे तो 66 ग्रेटर देन इक्वल टू 40 है क्या, अगर है तो लिस्ट में अपेंड करो, ये एम्प्टी लिस्ट है इसमें अपेंड करो, अदरवाइज मत करो. तो हियर वी गो, वी रन दिस पर्टिकुलर कोड एंड आई प्रिंट द पास लिस्ट. The moment I print the pass list, we have got our pass list. Only this fellow has passed, Jay has failed. Sunil, Anil and Leela has passed, Jay has failed to make it to that particular list. So that's how we can use these keyword arguments. So that was a brief. There is much more to discuss about these keyword arguments. We'll continue this discussion next time when we meet.